They used my recipes. They used my name. They used my years of work, my blood, my hands, my reputation. Then they handed everything to my sister. No warning, no meeting, no discussion, just a company-wide memo naming her the new head of the restaurant I built from scratch. I wasn't even in the room. They said she understands branding better. They said I was too emotionally attached. They said it's just business. No, it was never just business when I worked through food poisoning. It wasn't just business when I mortgaged my apartment to cover payroll. It wasn't just business when I stayed up 3 nights straight to save the opening. But fine, if I'm nothing but a line item in their books, I'll walk. And I did. I packed up every recipe, every supplier contract, every connection I'd built, and I left them with a kitchen full of stainless steel and no soul. 1 week later, I was on national TV, smiling, standing beside investors, launching my own empire. And they called. They begged. They said they made a mistake. I told them word for word, live with your golden girl, because you don't cut me out of my own story and expect me to come back for the cleanup. Hi, my name is Seraphine Voss. I'm the chef they tried to erase from my own legacy. And this is the story of how I lost everything, took nothing, and still came back with more than they ever imagined. But before I share my story, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple listening in the comments, or let me know where you're watching from. And if this hits something in your gut, hit that subscribe button. You being here means more than you know. Now, let me tell you everything. When I was 9 years old, I stepped into the kitchen of Magnolia's hearth for the first time. My grandfather took my hand, placed it on the handle of a paring knife, and whispered, "The kitchen listens better than people do." The scent of browned butter lingered in the air, dancing with the perfume of ripe peaches on the counter. I didn't know it then, but I was home. Now at 26, I still walk through that same back door. Before sunrise, the bricks of our building warmed by history and humidity. Magnolia's hearth sits nestled on the corner of Queen and Meeting Streets in Charleston's historic district, where moss-draped oaks frame wrought iron balconies, and the air always smells like salt smoke and sugar. Inside the walls wear their age, proudly exposed brick from 1975 shelves of worn cookbooks and a chalkboard that changes daily with my hand-lettered menus. By 4 p.m., the line stretches down the block. Guests come for the pan-seared scallops with peach glaze, the herb honey roasted chicken, the quiet grace in every plate. And every single one of those dishes came from me. I spent 8 years breathing life into this place. After Le Cordon Bleu, I came back with knives sharper than memory and a philosophy that blended French precision with the soul of Southern cooking. I created menus like symphonies, peach notes high and floral smoked meats anchoring deep. I taught our team how to salt before they taste to honor the food by never rushing it. I built our online presence from scratch, filming videos late at night with a borrowed ring light and my old iPhone. Our Instagram grew from 200 followers to over 75,000. TikTok fell in love with my caramelized peach tartlets. Local news called me Charleston's culinary storm in heels. But behind the camera, I was always just Seraphine, elbows deep in dough, obsessing over microgreens, fixing the broken fridge myself at 2 a.m. The $1 million contract with Coastal Elegance Hotels, I negotiated it alone, holding my ground across from 5 suited men who'd never deglazed a pan in their lives. That deal put our scallops on menus from Wilmington to Savannah. I handpicked every supplier, built relationships with fishermen, bakers, and spice traders. Celeste Brooks, our seafood queen, calls me her 4th daughter. She's up at dawn, just like me. Marcus, my kitchen manager, has stuck by me since I was 19 and too stubborn to admit when the sauce broke. Lila, my sous chef, whispers my recipes to herself like prayers. Together, we built a rhythm that never needed words, just glances across steam and clatter. But while the kitchen was my heartbeat, the family dining table always felt colder. My father, Elliot, co-owns Magnolia's Hearth with my mother. He calls himself a steward of legacy, though he hasn't held a ladle in years. For him, food is revenue, not ritual. My mother, Marjorie, is gentle, reserved. Too reserved. She stays on the sidelines of every argument, offering calm tones but no protection. And then there's Isadora, my baby sister. Fresh out of business school, MBA in hand, like a sword she never had to sharpen. Pretty articulate, confident, and entirely disconnected from this world of sweat, fire, and flour. She calls my food inspired, but impractical. Says I overthink texture and should simplify the offering. I used to laugh it off. But her smirk carries weight now that she's sitting in meetings. Last Thursday, I received an invitation to headline a culinary showcase in New Orleans. Investors, press, the works. When I told Lila, she smiled and whispered, "You're finally stepping into your light." I grinned, heart racing with excitement. But as I walked through the restaurant that night, past the table where my grandfather used to sit and taste my first attempts at remoulade, a chill crept down my spine. Not from the kitchen, from upstairs, from the family office. Something wasn't right. The summons came on a Monday morning. My father asked me to attend a quick family meeting in the private dining room after lunch service. I wiped flour off my apron, tied my curls back, and walked in expecting discussions about new inventory software or holiday staffing. But Elliot stood at the head of the table with his hands clasped napstati like a courtroom judge. Isadora sat beside him, legs crossed, notepad pristine, a glossy smile pasted across her lips. My mother hovered by the window, arms folded, eyes unreadable. "We've been evaluating the direction of Magnolia's Hearth," my father began, "and after careful consideration, Isadora will be stepping in as CEO effective next month." I blinked, laughed, then realized no one else was. "You're joking," I said. "I'm not," he replied. My breath tightened. "I've been running this kitchen for nearly a decade. I created every dish on the menu, secured every vendor, brought in the hotel contract." "You're a gifted chef," he interrupted. But Magnolia's Hearth is more than just a kitchen. It needs leadership with a broader strategic view. Isadora's MBA gives her that edge. An edge I shot back. She doesn't know the difference between Béarnaise and Bordelaise. Isadora tilted her head. "You're too emotional when it comes to food, Seraphine. That's not sustainable. We need a menu people can replicate scale. Sandwiches, loaded fries. Comfort food with lower prep time, higher margins." I looked to Marcus for backup. He stared at his hands. Lila shifted uncomfortably. No one said a word. I turned to my mother, my voice thin. "Do you agree with this?" Marjorie looked down. "Isadora has some good ideas. Maybe it's time for you to step back a little, let the family grow together." And just like that, the room tilted. The hours I'd spent building, burning, bleeding for this place, they disappeared beneath the sound of Isadora flipping her notebook open. Then came the second blow. "We're streamlining operations," Elliot added. "All kitchen decisions, menus, orders, even ingredient sourcing will now require CEO approval. That'll ensure consistency." Translation: Isadora would now vet my recipes, approve my grocery list. They weren't asking me to share the wheel. They were handing me a tray and telling me to smile. I didn't cry. Not then. I stood up, nodded once, and walked out. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, fingers tracing the edges of my worn leather recipe book. Page after page of sauces perfected over years of late-night inspirations jotted on coffee-stained paper. These weren't just dishes, they were memories. I asked myself, if I walk away, will there be anything left of what I built? And worse, would they even notice what they lost? The morning after the meeting, I arrived early, the way I always did before the bread had finished rising, before the streets outside had fully shaken off their mist. The kitchen lights were on, but the mood felt off. Marcus stood by the pass window, staring at the printout in his hands, like it might burn through his fingers. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me the paper. It was a new list of ingredient substitutions. For my beo tutrang, tridia pyong, bite bang, for my kong niep, dongoe. Tom trang vung, bien Carolina, bigach bode bang loe donglan. Hop to Florida. Dit hun koi kong kon duok, le, tu shuang truen thong, ma chuyen sang nap fan foi giare o savannah. Toi luot dong dong moi dong la mot, kaitat am tam vow, tritim toi. Who signed off on this? I asked, though I already knew. Marcus cleared his throat. Isadora. I sent her a direct email, short and pointed. This affects the quality of every dish on our menu. Her response was even shorter. Ingredient cost per unit is over optimal threshold. Adjustments were made accordingly. Financial logic. I walked into the front office and found Marcus nursing a burnt cup of coffee. Tell me this isn't permanent, I said. He hesitated, then looked down. Elliot said it's part of the new governance structure. CEO signs off on all procurement now. Just like that, my hands were tied behind my back while they handed the knife to someone who couldn't tell a scallop from a shrimp. That afternoon, I got a call from Celeste Brooks. Her voice, usually sharp and warm like hot cider, now sounded cautious. She called me Seraphine. Your sister, Celeste said. Told me not to bother sending fresh blackfish next week. Said she's switching to pre-frozen from Florida. I told her, no, I don't deliver frozen lies. I just wanted to let you know. I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to explain. But all I could manage was a breathless, I understand. I sat in a walk-in that evening, trying to catalog what I was losing. Not just ingredients or control, but connections, people. Stories that came with every crate of oysters, every jar of preserves. Then came the night I was cooking scallops for a VIP party from Coastal Elegance Hotels. I'd seared them, perfectly finished them, with my signature peach reduction plated each dish with care. I turned and found Isadora standing in the doorway, arms crossed. Smells expensive, she said. She picked up a fork, took a bite. It's good. But it's not scalable. Not worth the food cost. The next day, the dish was removed from the menu. No notice, no discussion, just erased. I tried to keep my head down, but word trickled back from the servers. Isadora had held a meeting with the front of house staff, telling them I was stuck in the past, resistant to market trends. She used words like agile, responsive, high ROI. Some of the younger servers started echoing her language. One even told Lila, maybe it's time for something fresh. The old stuff's not exciting anymore. I couldn't sleep that night. I opened my recipe book and turned to the page with the scallop and peach glaze. I rewrote it not because I needed to change anything, but because I needed to feel like it still belonged to me. This kitchen had been my refuge, my rhythm, my cathedral. Now it felt like a house someone else had quietly taken the keys to. For the first time in my life, I wondered if it was time to go. Not because I'd failed, but because I was no longer being allowed to succeed. The Charleston Convention Center buzzed with the kind of excitement that made knives tremble slightly in the hand. It was the Regional Food and Culture Showcase, and Magnolia's Hearth had been given a prime slot. I poured my heart into the tasting menu, 5 courses that told the story of the South Sweet, slow-burning, and quietly fierce. Scallops with peach glaze opened the journey, followed by smoked pork shoulder brushed with cane syrup, then roasted quail with fig compote. Julian Crane from Coastal Elegance Hotels had confirmed his attendance. This was our chance to solidify the brand across the Southeast. 1 hour before showtime, Marcus found me backstage, his face pale. You should see this. He handed me a new menu draft. Approved by Isadora and Elliot, it read across the top. The scallops were gone. In their place, shrimp sliders, fried, with Cajun aioli. I stormed into the prep area. We can't serve this, I hissed. This is a chain restaurant item, not Magnolia's Hearth. Elliot met my gaze, calm as ever. This is about scalability, consistency. If we're going to grow, we need to appeal to a wider base. But we're not a franchise, I snapped. We're a story, a legacy. Then, maybe, it's time for a new chapter, he said. During the presentation, I stood on stage, heart pounding, looking out at the sea of investors, journalists, and culinary influencers. I told them about the origins of our menu, about childhood summers on peach farms, about the first time I learned to caramelize onions until they tasted like secrets. Then, just as I spoke about the scallops, my scallops Isadora stepped beside me. That dish has been retired, she said smoothly into the microphone. We've since pivoted toward a more modern, economically viable offering. There was a silence that buzzed louder than applause. Afterward, Julian found me in the corridor behind the main hall. He spoke gently. Are you okay? I nodded. They didn't mention you, once he added. Isadora signed the partnership documents. Your name's off the proposal. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It wasn't just a demotion. It was erasure. That night, I found myself sitting across from Evelyn Harper at a small wine bar in Savannah. She sipped from a glass of chilled white and listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward. Let me ask you something. If Magnolia's Hearth wasn't your family's business, if it was just another restaurant, would you stay? I didn't answer, because I already knew. I drove home in silence, opened my laptop, typed out my resignation letter, read it twice, then folded it, printed it, and placed it beside the photo of me and Grandpa in the kitchen when I was 16. I hadn't sent it yet, but I had already left in my heart. I was just waiting for the right moment to say goodbye, out loud. I arrived at Magnolia's Hearth before sunrise, as I always had, but this time, I didn't walk in to cook. I walked in to leave. The kitchen was dark and still, the air thick with the scent of thyme and roasted bones from the night before. I opened the back door with my own key, perhaps for the last time, and moved quickly, quietly. No tears, no drama. I gathered my knives wrapped in linen, my leather-bound recipe notebook, copies of contracts I had personally negotiated, each bearing my signature, not the restaurant's. I knew exactly which drawer held my hand-sketched plating designs, and I took those too. Upstairs, the office was as impersonal as ever. I laid a printed resignation letter on my father's desk. One page, no explanations, no bitterness, just a clean signature at the bottom. Seraphine Voss. I paused at the threshold for a moment, listening to the silence that had replaced all the noise I once loved. The hiss of pans, the laughter between Marcus and Lila, the weight of routine. I texted Marcus only one line. Thank you for always believing in me. I didn't message my mother. I didn't message Isadora. I walked out of Magnolia's Hearth without a single backward glance. No one tried to stop me. That was the clearest sign yet that I had made the right choice. In the cab ride back to Savannah, I reached out to Celeste Brooks and Julian Crane. Both were stunned at first, but neither hesitated. I've worked with chefs, Celeste said. But you, Seraphine, you're a builder. You built trust. I'm sticking with you. Julian said much the same, that he hadn't signed a deal with a restaurant he had signed with a woman who made scallops taste like poetry. I met Evelyn Harper at her garden-facing studio the next day. I explained my idea, a restaurant that preserved the soul of Southern cuisine, but elevated it with global techniques and seasonal purity. She didn't even ask to see a draft. She just smiled and said, Savannah has always been waiting for you. While I poured my energy into designing the blueprint for Seraphine's atelier, the news from Charleston traveled faster than I expected. Within a week of my departure, Yelp reviews for Magnolia's Hearth plummeted. Longtime patrons complained about watery fish, under-seasoned pork cold soup. A couple even described a funeral-like tension among the staff. Lila quit after Isadora berated her during service for overcomplicating plating. Celeste stopped delivering seafood altogether, citing unpaid invoices and untrained hands. Marcus later told me that even the pantry smelled different, less like spice, more like disarray. Julian Crane pulled out of the $1 million expansion deal after a failed tasting session with Isadora. She didn't know the difference between hickory and mesquite, he said, almost in disbelief. I began receiving calls from Charleston every other day. My father, then my mother. Always from blocked numbers, always ignored. I didn't want to hear please. I didn't want them to act like I was the solution to a problem they created. Then, one afternoon, a voicemail came from my mother. Her voice cracked under the static. "Sweetheart, Magnolia's dying. They need you." I listened to the message once. Then I deleted it. Not because I was angry, but because I felt nothing. And that emptiness was more revealing than any insult they had ever thrown at me. That night, I stood barefoot in my small Savannah apartment. Just a stove, a wooden table. I refinished myself a few herbs on the sill. I lit the burner, laid a pan on the flame, dropped in a knob of butter, and listened as it sizzled golden and slow. For the first time in years, I cooked not for guests, not for press, not for family. I cooked for myself. Seraphine's atelier opened quietly. No grand gala, no marketing blitz, just an intimate, invitation-only dinner in a renovated brick building in downtown Savannah, where the wine cellar once held bootleg whiskey, and the walls now hummed with new dreams. Evelyn had arranged everything with her signature elegance, linen, napkins, candlelight. No distractions from the food. Marcus returned as my general manager, sharp as ever, already drawing floor plans on napkins and redesigning kitchen flow like it was choreography. Lila, loyal to the bone, cried when she saw her station again. Celeste drove the first delivery truck herself, her usual salty banter masking a tearful hug. 1 month later, Southern Living ran a feature calling us the new voice of Southern fine dining. We weren't just a restaurant, we were a movement. Dishes like smoked duck with pecan glaze, collard green ravioli, and of course, the peach-glazed scallops drew long reservations and glowing reviews. Then came the article. A food blogger, known more for gossip than gastronomy, published a piece titled, "Did Seraphine Steal Her Success?" It quoted Isadora, directly claiming I had taken Magnolia's hearth signature recipes and supplier lists without permission. The post exploded online. At first, I tried to ignore it, but the silence from Charleston was louder than the noise online. No one from my family spoke up, not to defend me, not to deny the lie. A week later, a lawsuit arrived. Isadora had filed a formal complaint in Charleston Superior Court. The claim that I had violated intellectual property rights and exposed confidential business practices. Every news outlet pounced. Headlines painted it as a domestic war over empire and inheritance. Some investors grew nervous. 2 potential backers pulled out from the Miami expansion. My attorney's phone rang nonstop. Then came the real blow. My father gave an interview to Charleston Foodscape. He said, without hesitation, my daughter chose money over family. She turned her back on her roots, on our name. Magnolia's Hearth is about community, not ego. It wasn't his words that gutted me. It was how practiced they sounded, as if he had been waiting for the spotlight. That night, Julian called. "Seraphine," he said carefully, "I want to be honest. Our board is reevaluating the contract with your restaurant. The legal noise, the public perception, it's a concern." I thanked him for his transparency, then hung up and sat alone in the dark kitchen. I pulled the old photo from my wallet, the one of me and Grandpa standing in aprons covered in flour, grinning with pride. I touched his face and whispered, "I was wrong, Grandpa. I thought I could leave without bleeding." The next morning, Evelyn came in early and found me already at the counter grinding black pepper by hand. "They think they've taken something from you," she said, "but they haven't, unless you let them." Her voice cut through the fog. I called my lawyer, a woman who had once been a chef, now specializing in culinary intellectual property. I gave her everything: notebooks, timestamps, cooking footage, school records. Then I picked a date and called every food editor I knew. We would host a press dinner, not a rebuttal, a statement. I would cook the scallops, just as I had at Le Cordon Bleu, just as I had at Magnolia's Hearth, just as I had for the couple who got engaged at table 4. Let them taste for themselves where those recipes came from. Let them decide who they really belonged to. The night after the lawsuit nearly broke me. I walked into the kitchen of Seraphine's atelier with a quiet resolve. I wasn't here to fight with words. I was here to lay it all bare with fire knives and the flavors only my hands could create. My lawyer Dana and I had spent days assembling everything. Every dish I had created, every contract I'd negotiated, every recipe I'd written in my notebooks going back to my days at Le Cordon Bleu. She categorized them by date, cross-referenced each handwritten note with coarse syllabi receipts and photos. She was meticulous, almost surgical. We filed a countersuit for defamation, and we announced a press event at Atelier, a transparency tasting, as Dana called it. We invited everyone: food critics, bloggers, former students, loyal guests, even our competitors. That morning, I sharpened the same paring knife my grandfather had given me when I turned 9. I wore a fresh white chef coat with Seraphine's Atelier stitched in deep navy thread across the breast. I tied my apron slowly like armor. The kitchen was open plan. I could see the guests as I stepped onto the line. The room fell silent. I began not with a statement, but a story. I told them about the first time I stepped into a kitchen hiding under my grandfather's prep table. About the Parisian chef who called me insufferably emotional, and yet passed me after I plated an oxtail dish that made her cry. I told them about that older couple at Magnolia's Hearth who ordered the peach-glazed scallops for their 40th anniversary and called it better than their wedding dinner. Then I brought out 3 identical plates each with scallops seared golden sitting on a puree of roasted corn and charred peach. One recipe from my culinary school days. One served at Magnolia's Hearth years ago. One served now at Atelier. I let the press taste. No monologue, no argument, just flavor. By midnight, Southern Living had published an article titled "From Betrayal to Breakthrough: The Rebirth of a Southern Chef." It included a full video of my demonstration. I could hear my own voice shaking slightly as I described my grandmother's peach orchard and how that memory turned into a glaze. It went viral. Within hours, Twitter buzzed. Hashtags like hashtag Chef Seraphine and hashtag Scallopgate trended in the South. Messages flooded in former students, food lovers, even strangers writing, "We believe you." 2 days later, the Charleston court issued its ruling. Magnolia's Hearth had no legal claim to my recipes. The court determined that my creations were personal intellectual property, rooted in documented education and innovation. The lawsuit was dismissed. Isadora was ordered to retract all defamatory statements and pay damages. That evening, Evelyn handed me a letter. It was from my mother. Her handwriting I knew instantly, looping precise, the kind she used to sign school permission slips and grocery lists. But this time, it was pages long. She wrote of growing up in a home where women were taught to shrink, not shine. She wrote of the fear she felt every time Elliot made a decision without asking her, and how she learned to survive by being silent. She admitted she saw what was happening to me and stayed quiet, hoping things would settle. At the end, she wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope one day you might let me stand beside you, not above you, not in front of you, just beside you." That night, I sat on the rooftop of Atelier with a mug of peach tea, watching the city lights shimmer. I hadn't won anything. I had reclaimed myself. The fallout at Magnolia's Hearth was swift and visible. Reviews continued to tank. Yelp was flooded with complaints: undercooked dishes, poor service, a missing soul in the food. The head chef quit, citing a culture of control and no creativity. Celeste cut all contracts after unpaid invoices piled up. Staff left in droves. Elliot tried damage control, offering discounts, marketing stunts, even rebranding ideas. None of it worked. Then he called me. "Come back," he said. "Be CEO. We'll give you 50% ownership." I waited a long second before answering. I'm not in the business of salvaging broken things I didn't break. I'm building something new, something that has my name on the door. A week later, the opening of Atelier's New Orleans location drew a packed crowd. Guests in linen suits and silk dresses clinked glasses under string lights and jazz riffs. I stood near the kitchen, watching my team work like a symphony. Marcus in command, Lila, plating with joy. That's when she walked in. Isadora. She stood at the threshold for a moment, then walked forward, not with arrogance, but with a kind of stillness I hadn't seen in her before. "I want to apologize," she said. "In front of guests, staff, and media, I let envy turn me into someone I don't recognize. I don't expect Seraphine to forgive me. I just wanted her to know. I understand now." I didn't speak immediately. The entire room watched me. Then I said, "I don't hate you, Isadora. But forgiveness takes time. And sometimes time needs space." No cheers, no gasps, just a slow, quiet round of applause, building until the room stood with me. Not because I had shamed her, but because I had chosen to stand tall without stepping on anyone. A few days later, I invited my mother to a private dinner at Atelier Savannah. She arrived unsure, dressed simply. We didn't speak much at first. I served her a dish I had crafted just for her chicken broth, infused with lemongrass, with poached peaches and jasmine rice, a reimagining of the soup she made for me when I had the flu as a child. She took a spoonful, then another. Then she cried. I reached across the table and held her hand. No apology was needed. Not anymore. In the days that followed, we finalized plans to open another atelier in Nashville. Investors returned. My team was strong. And one night, as I stood in the kitchen of the New Orleans location watching service unfold, I looked out the window. The sign glowed bright. Seraphine's Atelier. I hadn't gone back to reclaim my grandfather's legacy. I had carried it forward, carved it into stone, and written my name in fire. Sometimes the places that break us are the very reasons we rise. Not because we seek revenge, but because we remember who we are when no one else does. Success at its core isn't about proving them wrong. It's about finally living right with yourself. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, share your own journey, and don't forget to subscribe. Your presence here means more than you know.